Are you frustrated, even angry with the answers you're receiving to your pressing biblical questions? Are you hungry for some straight-talking biblical truth? Welcome into Igniting a Nation's Revealing the Truth with Rabbi Eric Walker. We're not afraid to tackle these issues and find the answers. Call us now at 850-660-9595. Here's your host, Rabbi Eric Walker.
Shalom and welcome into this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we talk about the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Rabbi Eric Walker. This is a live call-in show, and the phone lines are open at 850-660-9595. Give me a call and let's talk about what's on your heart, mind, or spirit. Please visit our website at ignitinganation.com for access to all of our teachings and to download our apps. We never want to fail to express our deepest appreciation to our faithful donors, and our sponsor for this first hour is the Don Burt team at Keller Williams Emerald Coast. Don and her team have been serving the needs of both military and civilian clients for many years and is loved by all. If you're even thinking about relocating to the beautiful Emerald Coast or are considering a move of any kind in Northwest Florida, give Don and her team a call at 850-684-4284 and check them out online at www.teamburt.com. Today is our edition of Revealing Prophecy, or formerly known as Prophecy in the News. And so we want to bring you a large variety of stories this morning, and I'm going to burn through them as quickly as I can. However, the phone lines are open at 850-660-9595, and please interrupt me, ask any question you want, call in, and if you're a first-time caller, you'll receive a free signed copy of my new book, 315, The Genesis of All Prophecy. So let's move forward and share some prophecy-related stories with you. Preparing the way for the Antichrist. Civil unrest set to surge worldwide. Soaring food, energy, and shelter inflation have led to what could be a new era of civil unrest worldwide. Pockets of unrest have been observed in Sri Lanka, Peru, Kenya, Ecuador, Iran, and Europe. New research forecasts a broader wave of discontent is just ahead. Earlier this year, Rockefeller Foundation President Rajiv warned that a massive, immediate food crisis is nearing. The UN said this summer that the world is marching towards starvation with an increased likelihood of civil unrest and political violence. Making sense of the impending global turmoil is Verge Maplecroft, a UK-based risk consulting and intelligence firm. They've just published an updated version of the Civil Unrest Index, covering 7 years of data, showing the last quarter saw the most countries ever since the index was created move higher in civil unrest. 101 of the 198 countries tracked by the firm saw increased risk of civil unrest. The impact is evident across the globe, with popular discontent over rising living costs emerging on the streets of developed and emerging markets alike, stretching from the EU, Sri Lanka, Peru to Kenya, Ecuador, and Iran. Verge wrote in the report, adding conditions are worsening as the frequency of protests and labor strikes could accelerate into the fall. Although there have been several high-profile and large-scale protests during the first half of 2022, the worst is undoubtedly yet to come, the firm warned. Verge noted, Algeria has the highest likelihood of projected civil unrest over the next half year because of rising inflation. Other areas include Europe, mainly due to energy hyperinflation decimating household finances. When the people's livelihoods are affected, watch out. That's an environment ripe for social unrest. It's already happening in Prague and could spread like wildfire. More than 70,000 Czechs protested over the weekend in Prague, the capital, demanding the ruling coalition take a neutral stance on the Ukraine war to ensure energy supplies from Russia aren't cut off ahead of winter. Protesters are outraged at the EU for sanctions against Russia that have sparked soaring electricity bills and triggered a cost of living crisis. Bosnia and Herzegovina, Switzerland, Netherlands, Germany, and Ukraine are all among the states with the biggest projected increase in risk, the report said. Only a significant reduction in global food and energy prices can arrest the negative global trend in civil unrest risk. Recession fears are mounting, and inflation is expected to be worse in 2023 than in 2022, Verge said. Energy prices, however, took another blow over the weekend as it was announced Russia gas flowing toward Europe won't be coming back anytime soon. A Gazprom announced that it had completely halted transport of gas to Nord Stream until a previously undetected oil leakage is rectified. That could take hours, days, or months. The shocking development is a massive blow to Europe, which is scrambling to fill up its gas storage ahead of winter, and which has been trying to guess Moscow's next step in the energy war for weeks. It's unlikely Germany can last very long without these supplies, and is already taking drastic action to reduce energy consumption throughout the country. However, it may not be enough. The question also remains if central banks can arrest inflation with the most aggressive interest rate hikes in decades. If not, the most experts expect the next 6 months are likely to be even more disruptive than earlier this year. We are watching civilization crumble all around us, and we're rapidly plummeting into an abyss of anarchy, madness, and chaos, and the days ahead are not going to be pleasant. Many Bible prophecy scholars speculate that such worldwide anarchy could open the door to civilization crying out for someone to save us from ourselves. Instead of looking to God, society will turn to yet another politician who will offer promises of peace and solution to the world's problems. But instead, it will begin one of the most terrible times in all of world history. The period known as the tribulation period will last 7 years and be instigated by the one known as the Antichrist. Complete setup. This is exactly how God foretold that there would be one who would arise, whose the number of his name in Hebrew would add up to 666. Yes, each one of the letters in the Hebrew alphabet has a numeric equivalent to it. Therefore, we can calculate using the 22 letters and their associated numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20, 30, 100, 200, 300. And so we are seeing the setup in the world as unrest is being experienced in over 60% of the world. It's amazing that we're alive at this time to see all of this unfolding right before our very eyes. We are not peddling fear. Prophecy is not to make you afraid. Prophecy is to let you know that your hope can only be found in one, and that is Messiah Yeshua, Jesus. Our next story for Iran, it's all about breakup time. In the winter of 2013, the Middle East was captivated by then U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's shuttle diplomacy, watching him hop from Ramallah to Jerusalem to Amman over and over again. Kerry was on an obsessive mission to bring peace between Israel and the Palestinians. At that time, I told a U.S. official that I was worried. This is the author of this story. History suggests that peace efforts in this region culminate with war. I said, "What's your fallback position?" The official replied that there was no plan B. We all know what ultimately happened. The peace process died, and 3 Israeli teens were abducted, triggering the 51-day Operation Protective Edge. Kerry's tennis match with the region's capitals ended with the U.S. flunking Middle East 101 yet again. It was only the Americans' latest futile effort at understanding the region. An inexhaustive list includes its failure to support the Shah of Iran during the Carter administration. President George W. Bush's illusion that toppling Saddam would usher in a prosperous Iraq. Condoleezza Rice's insistence that the Palestinian Authority conduct elections that ultimately led to Hamas taking over Gaza. And Barack Obama's Cairo address in 2009, as well as his decision to side with the protesters who wanted to take down then Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak 2 years later, which paved the way for the Muslim Brotherhood's rise to power. Over the past 18 months, the world has been watching the U.S. play another match of regional tennis, the nuclear talks with Iran. Tehran and the West have been hitting the ball back and forth. We occasionally get news about a deal getting closer, or that the latest draft is the final offer, and it's just a matter of days before a deal is made or that the window is closing. Both sides prefer this process to play itself out forever, very much like an inconclusive sporting match. Iran is hardly the most pressing issue on the U.S. foreign policy docket. As for Iran, time is on its side. Because a protracted process allows it to continue its nuclear program. Enrichment levels have already reached 60% purity levels. Tehran's coffers have been filling up in part because of the rise in oil and fuel prices and Chinese consumption. And Russia has been buying Iranian arms. On top of that, the Iranian regime is not facing an existential threat. It is sad that the U.S. has once again fallen in the pattern of the pursuit of peace, leading to a potential war. The Iranians' response to the latest U.S. offer has confirmed the author's suspicions, which are shared by others, that Iran doesn't want a deal, but is only using the talks to buy time. The talks have allowed Iran to divert attention from what it really cares about, shortening the time it would take to reach a bomb, the breakout time to zero. This means Iran will be ready to break toward a nuclear weapon once the talks collapse. By the time the U.S. comes up with a plan B, the Iranians believe they will already have a bomb. For Iran, the never-ending tennis match is just a ruse. The real game is elsewhere. From what has been reported in the media, Tehran's breakout time currently stands at several weeks. One can assume that Iran will not be foolish enough to show its hand and will hold some cards close to its chest. Then, when the talks are history, they will break towards a bomb, and the U.S. will face the excruciating dilemma it wanted to avoid all along: accepting a nuclear-armed Iran or a bloody war with the murderous regime in Tehran. To paraphrase the famous Churchillian adage, the U.S. was given a choice between war and dishonor. It chose dishonor, and both Israel and the U.S. are facing the real prospects that they will have war. Originally published by the JewishNewsService.org. Our next story, brought to us by Michael Snyder. Will the new Shemitah cycle be one of the biggest turning points in all of American history? You remember that Jonathan Cahn was one who kind of introduced the concept of Shemitah to the world. And now we're looking at the next period of time in this cycle. A number of people have recently asked Michael Snyder about the Shemitah year lately, and so in this article, he will attempt to provide some answers. According to Orthodox Judaism, the current 7-year Shemitah cycle will end, and a new 7-year Shemitah cycle will begin with Rosh Hashanah, which arrives on the evening of September 25th. But that assumes that they have been calculating the Shemitah cycles correctly. There are some that believe that this is not actually a Shemitah year at all. There are others that believe that a Shemitah year should begin on the first day of the biblical year and not on Rosh Hashanah. And then there's the debate between those that believe a full Jubilee cycle is 49 years long and those that believe a full Jubilee cycle is 50 years long. As you can see, research on this topic can quickly become extremely complicated. So let me start off by reviewing some of the basics. This is what Wikipedia has to say about how the Shemitah year is observed in the land of Israel today. The Sabbath year, Shemitah, literally means in Hebrew, release, also called the sabbatical year, or Shevet, literally means seventh, or Sabbath of the land, is the 7th year of the 7-year agricultural cycle mandated by the Torah in the land of Israel and observed in Judaism. During Shemitah, the land is to lie fallow, and all agricultural activity, including plowing, planting, pruning, and harvesting, is forbidden by halakha, Jewish law. Other cultivation techniques such as watering, fertilizing, weeding, spraying, trimming, and mowing may be performed as a preventive measurement only. not to improve the growth of any trees or other plants. Additionally, any fruits or herbs which grow of their own accord, and where no watch is kept over them, are deemed hefker or ownerless and may be picked by anyone. A variety of laws also apply to the sale, consumption, and disposal of Shemitah produce. All debts, except those of foreigners, were to be remitted. Unfortunately, a lot of man-made rules have been created to allow people to keep the Shemitah without really keeping it. Even for those inclined to consider the Shemitah binding, Talmudic scholars developed a mechanism known as prosbul to effectively negate the loan forgiveness aspects of Shemitah. This process hinges on the scriptural command to forgive the debts of a friend or brother from Deuteronomy 15:2, which Talmudic scholars chose to interpret as implying that only private debts are canceled. Making a prosbul transfers the debt to a public religious court, a beit din, so the debt is theoretically no longer between friends, brothers, or neighbors. According to this interpretation, the once private debt is fully recoverable and nothing is forgiven. See Mark 7, verses 8 and 9. Likewise, those interested in maintaining farms during a Shemitah Sabbath year have turned to a rabbinic interpretation which effectively nullifies the law. By hiring non-Jewish hands to work the landowner can claim to be following the Shemitah by not himself cultivating the land. Others are doing it for him, and he is not laboring personally. Obviously, this is not what God originally intended. According to Leviticus 25, the Shemitah year is supposed to be a year of complete rest for the land. Then the Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, when you come into the land I give you, the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather in its fruit. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. You shall neither sow your field nor prune your vineyard. That which grows by itself from your harvest you shall not reap, nor gather the grapes of your unpruned vines, for it is a year of complete rest for the land." And according to Deuteronomy chapter 15, at the end of the Shemitah year, there is to be a relinquishing of debts. At the end of every 7 years, you shall grant a relinquishing of debts. This is the manner of the relinquishing. Every creditor that has loaned anything to his neighbor shall relinquish it. He shall not exact it of his neighbor or of his brother, because it is called the Lord's relinquishment. According to Orthodox Judaism, the last day of every Shemitah year falls on Elul 29, the day right before Rosh Hashanah on the biblical calendar. This would be equivalent to the Feast of Trumpets in Leviticus 23. Interestingly, there have been some huge stock market crashes on Elul 29. For example, on September 17, 2001, which corresponded with Elul 29 on the biblical calendar, we witnessed the greatest one-day stock market crash in U.S. history up to that time. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 684 points, and that was a record that stood for precisely 7 years until the end of the next Shemitah year. In September 2008, we witnessed another historic stock market crash. On September 29, 2008, which corresponds with Elul 29 on the biblical calendar, the Dow Jones Industrial Average plunged 777 points. That was another all-time record, and many felt that it was extremely significant that the Dow declined 777 points, just as one 7-year cycle was ending and another 7-year Shemitah cycle was beginning. In 2015, the stock market was closed on Elul 29 because it fell on Sunday, September 13th. But we did witness a tremendous amount of financial shaking during the months of August and September that year. The pattern does seem to strengthen in the case of those who believe that 2001, 2008, and 2015 were Shemitah years. If those 3 years were Shemitah years, then 2022 would be a Shemitah year as well. And that would make 2029 a Shemitah year too. In fact, many currently believe that the last Shemitah year in the current Jubilee cycle will be in 2029. And if Jesus died in 29 AD, as many believe, that would put the Shemitah year of 2029, precisely 2,000 years after Jesus died on the cross for our sins. In addition, it appears that the end of the current Jubilee cycle will wrap up the 120 Jubilee cycles of 50 years each since the creation of humanity. As Michael Snyder detailed in his book entitled 7-Year Apocalypse, all throughout history, there's been a belief that God has a 7,000-year plan for humanity. After 6,000 years of human rebellion is complete, Jesus will rule from Jerusalem for 1,000 years during the Sabbath millennium. I call this the Y6K. Everybody was up in arms about Y2K, and that was a false alarm. But Y6K is real. So if God created the heavens and the earth and all that was in them in 6 days, and Scripture tells us a day is to the Lord is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years like a day, then if we connect those two passages of Scripture together, we can see that the end of 6,000 years from the sixth day of creation, the day of man, that there will be 1,000-year period of rest, referred to in Revelation as the 1,000-year reign of Messiah. This is one of the reasons why we are supposed to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. We remember that God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh day. It is also a prophetic picture that points to the time when the world will be at rest for 1,000 years after experiencing so much chaos for the preceding 6,000 years. If we really are getting very close to the return of Jesus to this planet, that means everything is about to change. But as far as the Shemitah and Jubilee cycles are concerned, I want to stress that we can't be too dogmatic about them. We simply cannot prove that the Shemitah years have been calculated correctly. And there's still a lot of debate about whether a Shemitah year should begin at the beginning of a biblical year or on Rosh Hashanah. I believe that debate will eventually be resolved, but for now, it's still an open question. Having said all that, what's exceedingly clear is that we are living in the end times and the return of Jesus is drawing near. So we should be expecting biblical calendar cycles to converge, and I believe that's exactly what is taking place. All of human history has been building up to a grand crescendo, and we get to be here for it. What an exciting time to be alive. Thank you, Michael Snyder, for that great report. From All Israel News, we find this analysis from Mayan Hoffman. Is Israel on the verge of a third Intifada? Experts tell All Israel News it's a slippery slope in the West Bank as terror attacks continue to rise. The security situation in the West Bank is rapidly deteriorating and could put the country at risk for a terror escalation tantamount to a new Intifada, security experts told All Israel News. We're not there yet, but the situation is very problematic, explained Dr. Kobe Michael, a senior research fellow at the Institute for National Security Studies and editor of Strategic Assessment. There's too much motivation by too many people who want to increase terror. It's a slippery slope, he said. Michael made the statement only days after a Palestinian gunman opened fire at a bus near the settlement of Hamra in the Jordan Valley, wounding 6 soldiers, including 1 seriously, and the civilian bus driver. Last week, 2 Israelis were among a group that went to pray at the tomb of Joseph in Nablus, were shot and wounded, and Palestinians set their vehicle on fire. Shots were also fired at an Israeli security vehicle in Shavai Shomron, northwest of Nablus. And there were 12 minor attacks carried out last week with weapons like rocks or Molotov cocktails, according to Rescue Without Borders in Judea and Samaria. In the past several months, the West Bank has seen a spike in significant attacks, shootings, stabbings, vehicular attacks, and the use of improvised explosive devices, according to the Meir Amit Intelligence and Terrorist Information Center, the ITIC. In August, there were 6 significant attacks compared to only 1 in the same month last year and 3 in 2020. in 2020. ITIC showed there were 5 attacks in July compared to 1 in July 2021 and none in 2020. Since the start of the year, there have been 38 significant attacks, according to ITIC, compared to 33 the year before, which included the May war between Israel and Hamas on the Gaza Strip when tensions were outwardly high. What is different today than in the past, however, is that almost all of these attacks are carried out impromptu by individuals or small squads that organize independently, explained Lior Ackerman, a former brigadier general in the Shin Bet, the Israel security agency. However, these individuals, although planning their operations on their own, are often being motivated by Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or even provided with weapons or financial support by the terrorist organization. Michael said Palestinian Islamic Jihad has become the dominant force in Jenin and is becoming stronger in Nablus, Ramallah, and other northern West Bank Palestinian towns. One of the main reasons for the Palestinian Islamic Jihad's ability to have the influence it enjoys today, the complete loss of Palestinian governments in the area, Ackerman explained. The Palestinian Authority, ruled by an ever-weakening president, Muhammad Abbas, is no longer functioning, leaving a vacuum that the Palestinian Islamic Jihad is trying to fill. There is incessant incitement against the state of Israel, initiated by the Palestinian Authority and its leaders, and on the other hand, a complete unwillingness to reach political achievements, Ackerman said. Moreover, Iran and Hezbollah have their tentacles in the cities and are collaborating with Palestinian Islamic Jihad, funneling money to anyone who wants to carry out an attack, even if the person is not directly associated with their terrorist organization. And finally, intense anti-Israel rhetoric being spread on social networks incites the younger generation, which does not remember the repercussions of the Second Intifada. It's been 20 years since the last Intifada, and we are talking about a new generation of young people, Michael explained. The fear that is among their parents is not there among this generation, and as such, they are ready to go out and fight. What we are seeing is a very high number of young Palestinians willing to attack the IDF when they are on patrol or carrying out activities in the area, he continued. They are more determined to flex their muscles. Clashes broke out between Israeli soldiers and armed Palestinians in Jenin on Monday night, when the IDF entered the city to demolish the home of the terrorist who perpetrated the April 22 mass shooting on Dizengoff Street in Tel Aviv. All of this is shared on the social networks in real time to ignite the street and rile up the people, Michael said. At the same time, a flood of new weapons has made these attacks more dangerous. Although in 2021, the Shin Bet stopped a number of terror attacks, most were rocks and explosive devices. Today, shooting attacks have become almost commonplace. Michael said weapons are flowing into the territories, often paid for by Iran and Hezbollah, but smuggled from the Jordan Valley with the help of some members of the Bedouin community and from Jordan and Egypt. Last week, the IDF and the Defense Ministry reported preventing the smuggling of large quantity of weapons and ammunition into the West Bank, including nearly 40 handguns, 9,000 bullets, and several M16 assault rifles. On Friday, while Israeli security forces were operating in Rujib, a Palestinian village east of Nablus, they confiscated an M16 assault rifle, a handgun, ammunition, pipe bombs, and hand grenades from a single terrorist home, the IDF and Israel media reported. For every shipment we stopped, there are 3 we did not stop, Michael said. He added that the money Palestinian Islamic Jihad is receiving is also being used to build explosive devices labs and weapons factories. Guns they make locally also know how to kill, he said. While the IDF is fighting the terror, Michael said it has shied away from carrying out any kind of major attack like Defensive Shield on March 20, 2002, which helped put a stop to the Second Intifada. That operation focused on the cities of Nablus, Ramallah, Jenin, and Bethlehem, took nearly 2 months, but effectively dismantled the terror network operating in those areas at the time. It led to a marked decrease in the number of attacks carried out against Israel, including the cessation of shooting attacks toward the Jerusalem neighborhood of Gilo. Instead, we are running commando operations, which allow the terrorist groups to bring dozens or even hundreds of activities to attack our soldiers and sometimes even be successful in that they harm one kill one of our people. Ackerman said the IDF and Shin Bet are effectively fighting against terrorist headquarters in all areas and striking at the heads of terrorism. In the absence of the ability to advance on the political level, the only way is to continue to fight terrorism intentionally, he said. But Michael said that Israel has allowed the situation to deteriorate and that incidents like the firefight in Jenin Monday night give the terrorists a feeling of power and a belief that they could hold their own against Israeli soldiers. We've hit that time where we need to take a break, and we'll take that break and be back with you in 3 minutes and 20 seconds. So please stand by. We'll be right back.
We'll be right back with more Revealing the Truth with Rabbi Eric Walker right after this commercial break.
People do some pretty cool things in their 40s and 50s. Why should saving for retirement be any different? I mean, they go back to college, learn new instruments, start skateboarding.
Whoa!
Okay, maybe that one's not for everybody, but saving for retirement is. With aceyourretirement.org, you can get on track with your retirement savings no matter your age. Just have a 3-minute chat with Avo, the friendly digital retirement coach from AARP. You'll get personalized recommendations based on your input that are easy to understand and work with your lifestyle. It's quick, easy, and free. Plus, it's sponsored by AARP, so you know they got your back.
Woohoo! Gnarly move, Dad.
Thanks, sweetie.
So wherever you are in your retirement savings journey, head to aceyourretirement.org and start chatting with Avo today. That's aceyourretirement.org. A message from AARP and the Ad Council.
Right now, our country feels divided, but there's a place where people are coming together.
I gotta tell you, I was nervous to talk to someone so different than me.
Me too, but I'm glad we are.
Love Has No Labels and One Small Step are helping people with different political views, beliefs, and life experiences come together through conversation, and it feels good.
Wow, your story is so...
Interesting?
Yeah.
When people actually sit down, talk, and listen to one another, they can break down boundaries and connect as human beings. At lovehasnolabels.com/onesmallstep, you can listen to amazing, life-changing conversations and find simple tools to start a conversation of your own.
I know one thing. This conversation gives me hope.
It gives me a lot of hope, too.
Take a step toward bringing our country and your community together by having the courage to start a conversation at lovehasnolabels.com/onesmallstep. A message from StoryCorps, Love Has No Labels, and the Ad Council.
In the Garden of Eden, God spoke his first prophecy. Not much has been said or written about the eternal impact of the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. What if every prophecy, and even Jesus' return, was tied to this prophecy and no one ever told you? Now you have a chance to read for yourself Rabbi Eric's latest book, 315, The Genesis of All Prophecy, featured on Skywatch TV. This book is a must-read. Get your copy at Amazon or from Skywatch TV. And don't forget to order The Codist, Rabbi Eric's prophetic biblical thriller, exposing a diabolical plot to weaponize your DNA. And while you're at it, get his book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living. Welcome back to Revealing the Truth with Rabbi Eric Walker. Here's your host, Rabbi Eric Walker, ready to take your calls at 850-660-9595.
Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and welcome into this edition of Revealing Prophecy. We're glad you're with us. Our phone lines are open at 850-660-9595. We hope you'll call and comment on some of these stories. As I continue in this report out of a potential third Intifada, the report continues. If we continue this way, it will not take long for the Palestinians to build up their ethos and get even more Palestinians motivated to take revenge against Israel. Then we could face something much more serious even than what we're seeing now. Already the situation is spreading from Jenin to Nablus. It could quickly spread to Bethlehem and Hebron too. It could get much worse very fast. we could see ourselves facing a much more serious security situation, even within the next couple of weeks. The report ends. I think that is where we are going. Terror within the borders, influenced by Iran. Their proxy Hezbollah in Lebanon, prepared to strike. And so, because these stories and all these prophetic stories are interwoven, interconnected, and converging at the same time, this report that I'm bringing you is just news from Sunday to this very morning. Just in the last 4 days, all this is taking place and unfolding. The IDF holds exercises near Lebanese border. Hezbollah remains a threat in the territory north of Israel and opposes any concessions to the Jewish state. The Israeli military concluded 3 days of drills near the Lebanese border yesterday, with civilians told to expect to hear explosions in the area. Despite heightened tensions with the Lebanon-based Iranian proxy terrorist group Hezbollah, the Israeli Defense Forces announced the drill in advance, indicating that it did not come from a change in the military situation. Tensions between Israel and Lebanon increased recently over the rights to maritime territory off the coast of Lebanon and Israel, which contain rich deposits of natural gas. The ongoing U.S. brokered talks are believed to conclude with an agreement imminently. The maritime territory conflict involves some 860 square kilometers, that's 330 square miles, of the Mediterranean Sea that is claimed by both countries. While Israel holds that the area lies within its internationally recognized economic waters, Lebanon started voicing a claim to the Karish gas field, or implying that it lies within disputed territory upon Israel's installation of a gas rig in that area. In recent months, Hezbollah indicated that it completely opposed to granting any concessions to Israel. In July, the terrorist organization launched 4 unarmed surveillance drones toward the Karish gas rig, all of which Israeli forces shot down. The last time Israel fought a war in Lebanon was in 2006. The two nations have no diplomatic relations, but are separated by a United Nations-controlled ceasefire line. Last May, Israel held joint exercises with Cyprus, simulating a deep military strike into Lebanon against Hezbollah. The Chariots of Fire exercise, held that same month, predicted thousands of Lebanese casualties and 300 Israeli deaths. The simulation estimated that Hezbollah would launch about 1,500 rockets a day. Now, if you're familiar with the Golan Heights, if you're familiar with the outlook at Mount Bental, the Valley of Tears overlook, straight ahead of you is Syria. 60 kilometers away are the outskirts of Damascus. And you can see the expanding towards the Israeli border, advancing neighborhoods being built as Damascus is being shelled and bombing is taking place. Civilian developments are developing closer and closer and closer, where you can actually hear rocket fire. In the valley, you can hear machine gun fire. And as you look, you see the United Nations peacekeeping forces and what's considered to be a ceasefire line, which the United Nations patrols. And as you look, you'll see to your left, you'll see at the top of the mountain from the overlook is the border between Lebanon and Syria. It extends down into the valley, but you see at that top, you see 2 lookout posts, Israel on one side and Lebanon on the other. Well within striking distance. If Lebanon were to launch 1,500 rockets a day, this attack would affect all the communities in the Golan Heights and the ongoing development of the oil reserves in that territory. That would bring all-out war to the region. Israel yesterday took out Syria's airport and continues their bombing efforts to keep Iranian and Russian forces from advancing on Israel. Russia and Iran have been working in concert because of Iranian oil to arm terrorist organizations in the region. This is just the tip of the iceberg of Ezekiel 38 and 39. But as we know from Ezekiel 38 and 39, there are 4 prerequisites to the campaign of Armageddon. And those 4 prerequisites have not yet been met. So when God talks about these 4 prerequisites, a people living in peace, Israel is on the verge of an intifada within its borders and another war with Lebanon. If we see this happen, this will be the advancement of a war, possibly the war before the war, the Psalm 83 war. Some believe that that has already happened, but if you follow the teachings of Bill Salas and many other prophecy experts, you'll see that these Confederates of Psalm 83 are not mentioned in the Ezekiel 38-39 coalition. Is that because they no longer exist? And that's why Israel would be living at peace. It would have no walls or gates, that would have so much wealth that the world would want to plunder it, so much silver and gold. Could that be the silver gas pipelines that we see now being built to take gas from Haifa to Cyprus out in the Mediterranean? Could it be gold, liquid gold, black gold, the oil found in one of the largest oil deposits ever discovered on planet Earth, right there in the Golan Heights? Stunning times we are living in. Startling times we are living in. Exciting times we are living in. Our next story brought to us by Vishesh Resikani. Could China's Yuan replace the US dollar as the world's dominant currency? Here's how the Asian giant's trade supremacy is rapidly boosting its reserve status. Think the greenback can't be replaced? You might be surprised. China's economy has been immensely successful by most measures. Its gross domestic product of 17.7 trillion is second only to the United States. It's also the 3rd largest trading nation in the world, behind only the US and the EU. However, China's currency, the renminbi, only accounts for 3% of global trade. Compare that to 87% market share of the US dollar. Despite its economic and political power, the country doesn't dominate the global flow of fiat currency. Now it's looking to change that. Here is China's multi-trillion, multi-decade plan to replace the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. Achieving reserve currency status isn't a formal process. Instead, it's like winning a popularity contest. The most popular currency for global trade and cross-border commerce emerges as the de facto reserve currency. The popularity of a currency is simply based on the perception of security and the resilience of the issuing country. This is the asset or currency that most central banks across the world prefer to hold in reserve, which is why the dominant asset earns the label of reserve currency. Since 1450, there have been 6 major reserve currency periods. Portugal dominated the global reserves until 1530, when Spain became stronger. Currencies issued by the Netherlands and France dominated world trade for much of the 17th and 18th century. But the emergence of the British Empire made the pound sterling the reserve currency until the end of the First World War. The US dollar displaced the pound just as America gained economic superiority over Britain. More than 75% of global transactions have been completed in the US dollars since 2008. The dollar also accounts for more than 60% of foreign debt issuance and 59% of global central bank reserves. Although the dollar's grip on all these markets and instruments has been gradually declining in recent years, no other currency comes close to these levels. The Chinese renminbi certainly isn't a viable alternative, but geopolitical and macroeconomic trends support its rise to dominance. This year, China's leaders made it clear that they wanted to boost the renminbi's profile as a reserve currency. China's economy and trade flows are large enough to support such a move. However, the country now needs to convince foreign central banks to start holding the Chinese yuan, the principal unit of the renminbi, in reserve. In July, the People's Bank of China announced a collaboration with 5 nations and the Bank for International Settlements to achieve this. China, along with Indonesia, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Chile, would each contribute 15 billion yuan, about 2.2 billion, to this renminbi liquidity arrangement. Meanwhile, the Chinese yuan has already become a de facto reserve currency in Russia. Russia's leadership turned to China after facing sanctions from the West due to its invasion of Ukraine earlier this year. Now, 17% of Russia's foreign reserves are denominated in yuan. The yuan is also the 3rd most demanded currency on the Moscow exchange. As these partnerships become stronger, the yuan's status as a reserve currency could be further entrenched. Economists, including Barry Eichengreen of the University of California, Berkeley, and Camille Macaire of France's central bank, published a paper analyzing the yuan's potential as a reserve currency. The researchers argue that replacing the dollar isn't going to be easy or quick. However, they found evidence that the yuan reserves were steadily increasing in countries that had tighter trade relationships with China. This growing influence could make the yuan an alternative to the US dollar in a multipolar world. In other words, China might chip away at the dollar's influence over time. The study authors said that the renminbi's current position was similar to the US dollar in the 1950s. Based on that comment, it could be just a few decades before the yuan gains parity. If the forecasters are correct, long-term investors should consider some exposure to yuan-denominated assets and Chinese stock with significant yuan earnings. Interesting, China is known in the Bible as the nation of Sin, S-I-N. And yes, they are mentioned, as the Bible refers to 3 continents only: Asia, Africa, and Europe. And so if we look at an economic one world order and one world currency, and if we look at the predominant domination of Russia and its communism, China and its communism, the various forms of socialism and communism being promoted and adopted by much of South America, this move towards globalization and one world economy and one world order is all ripe for the setup to usher in the Antichrist. Now we know that the Antichrist will rise and fall, and if you want that teaching, go to ignitinganation.com, click on the store, and scroll to the teaching, The Rise and Fall of the Antichrist. And you'll get a real biblical teaching on this subject exactly. The rise and fall of the Antichrist. What the setup in the world needs to be. Wars, rumors of wars, famine and pestilence in diverse places. When the birth pains begin to come closer and closer and closer together. When civil unrest comes closer and closer and closer and is more extensive throughout the globe. We see the setting ripe for some new voice to rise up. We thought it might be Erdogan for a period of time until they entered into a relationship with Israel. But as I asked yesterday, is that just a Trojan horse or the setup for a Trojan horse? We know that Erdogan's desire is to be all things to all people. However, I believe it will be a new voice who will rise up, who will bring peace. He will make a covenant with many. As we see, China is out there making a covenant with many. They're out securing financial relationships based on their value of their currency. So, if the forecast is that China is competing with the American dollar, we need to look at China's investments in America and American investments in China. I believe that China is the second largest landowner, second only to the United States government. Now, I have not researched that in some time, but at last report that I had access to, that was the case. So, this is setting the stage for the rise and the fall of the Antichrist, which sets the stage for the armies of the Antichrist and the campaign of Armageddon. My friends, as we look at these days as the last days, we see all of these signs converging at one time. All these things happening concurrently. COVID is not over. But scientists are reporting that where the vaccines were going after the spike protein and were effective against the spike protein, they're now mutating to have other avenues that will not make it more contagious, but make the virus more severe. Was all of this from gain-of-function research in a Chinese laboratory? The question is still on the minds of many. But as we see large companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google, and many more doing large amounts of business with China, we strengthen their currency and we weaken ours. The supply chain issues that we had from COVID all stem from so much of American consumption comes through Amazon, and their largest country vendor is China. It's the perfect setup. when there's economic unrest, when there's political unrest, when there are those wars which we are taking place, not just in Ukraine, but in other parts of the world, rumors of wars, the potential third Intifada, the potential war with Lebanon, the potential for Russia to make a huge mistake that will then engage NATO. All of that would ensure that there would be a third world war. The nations will be polarized, one against another, choosing who they will stand for. But at the center of all of this is Israel. The epicenter, Jerusalem. All this is converging biblically. All prophetic paths lead to Jerusalem, the city of our King, the place where Messiah was crucified, rose from the dead, was seen by over 500 eyewitnesses, and walked this earth for 40 days until his final ascension to heaven. The place in which he will return. And when he returns, and I believe he will return to a secure location because Jerusalem will not have Jewish people living there. The leadership of Jerusalem was warned by God to get out. And so when Yeshua comes to redeem the tents of Jerusalem first, that tells us that they're not in Jerusalem, they're in temporary dwellings. People in Jerusalem don't live in tents, they live in beautiful homes and apartments. So I believe that place will be Petra. Others have a different opinion. But then he makes a victory ascent of 200 miles, referred to in the Bible. And then Zechariah 14, he plants his feet on the Mount of Olives. And the mountain splits in two, all the way across to the Temple Mount. All this is getting prepared to unfold as the world moves closer and closer and closer to the end time scenario. Where are we on that timeline? It's hard to say. But the tribulation begins at the signing of that covenant with many. So keep your ears and eyes looking towards Israel and the world outside of America to look for the biblical signs of what's taking place and its prophetic impact. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back at the top of the hour.
We pray today's show blessed you as much as it did us, and hope you will join us weekdays from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Replays of the show are available online at www.live365.com. Please email your questions and comments to Rabbi Eric at ignitinganation.com or on our social media platforms. Stay tuned for the second hour of Revealing the Truth with Rabbi Eric Walker. The phone lines are open at 850-660-9595.
To some people, the sound of a baby babbling doesn't mean much. But that's not necessarily true. By 6 months, they're combining vowels and consonants. By 9 months, they're trying out different kinds of sounds. And by 12 months, their babbling is beginning to take on some meaning. Especially if there's no babbling at all. Little to no babbling by 12 months or later is just one of the possible signs of autism in children. Early screening and intervention can make a lifetime of difference and unlock a world of possibilities. Take the first step at autismspeaks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.
The following is made possible by Dad.
Why was the basketball court all wet? Because the players kept dribbling all over it.
The dad joke. Corny, groan-worthy, but also one of the simplest ways to share a moment with your kids.
Why do you have to be careful when it's raining cats and dogs? Because you might step in a poodle.
And kids that spend more time with their dads grow up to be smarter, more successful.
Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding.
And with any luck, funnier adults.
Why didn't the skeleton go to the dance? Because he didn't have anybody to go with.
Dad jokes rule. So take a moment to make a moment and give your kid a laugh. It's as easy as going to fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
That's really funny.
The program you are listening to is brought to you by Igniting a Nation, a 501c3 nonprofit ministry. We are 100% supported by your contributions. You can partner with us and support this program, our outreach in Kisii, Kenya, and our support of Israel. Visit us at www.ianbn.com and take advantage of access to thousands of hours of teaching. You can also donate there on our social media platforms. Your support is a blessing here, there, and everywhere. Welcome back to Revealing the Truth with Rabbi Eric Walker. Here's your host, Rabbi Eric Walker, ready to take your calls at 850-660-9595.
Hello and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we talk about the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, welcoming you into this Wednesday edition of Revealing Prophecy. We've covered a number of great stories, and this second hour is sponsored by our great friends and my personal chiropractor at Navarre Chiropractic Center. Dr. Laird Likens and the entire team took me from 24 hours a day of debilitating neck pain to a pain-free life. Not all chiropractors are focused on a holistic approach that incorporates every technique from classical adjustment to acupuncture, heat therapy, traction, massage, and personal trainers to make sure you will get the best care possible. This full-service practice should be your first stop after a car accident or any injury to your body. No insurance, no worries. They have a plan to accommodate any situation. Give them a call right now at 850-939-3339 and look them up online at NavarreChiropracticCenter.com. Don't forget our phone lines are open at 850-660-9595, and we're happy to take your calls, and first-time callers will receive a signed copy of my new book, 315, The Genesis of All Prophecy. Our next story brought to us by Damon Duck, entitled Decision Time. It's interesting that yesterday's show was about answering the question, are you prepared? Are you prepared to make a decision? And then this story appears. The story reads, throughout his career as Senator, Vice President, and President, Joe Biden has consistently expressed his support for the New World Order. On April the 21st, 1992, he wrote a controversial op-ed for the Wall Street Journal titled, How I Learned to Love the New World Order. On April the 5th, 2013, Biden said the affirmative task we have now is to actually create a new world order. On May 28th, 2014, Biden said, I believe we, and mainly you, the Air Force Academy graduating class, have an incredible opportunity to lead in shaping a new world order for the 21st century. On March the 21st, 2022, Biden said this is going to be a new world order out there. There's going to be a new world order out there, and we've got to lead it. We've got to unite the rest of the free world in doing it. On August the 25th, Biden said, what's happened is there aren't many real Republicans anymore. I respect conservative Republicans. I don't respect these MAGA Republicans. They are a threat to our democracy. Biden made the last statement at a Democratic National Committee rally and fundraiser in Rockville, Maryland, to boost support and raise money for the upcoming midterm elections. MAGA Republicans are voters that supported former president's Make America Great Again agenda. Biden does not respect MAGA Republicans because he considers them a threat to his Build Back Better agenda, his plans to weaken America and surrender America's sovereignty to the New World Order, the coming prophesied one world government, and religion. Biden said America is at an inflection point, a point of major change, and needs to decide if the U.S. will be a nation of unity, of hope, of optimism, not a nation of anger, violence, hatred, and division. In the same speech that urged unity in America, Biden accused millions of Republican voters of stoking anger, violence, hatred, and division. According to Jesus, the anger, violence, hatred, division, famine, pestilence, war, death, and destruction of the New World Order will be worse than anything that has ever happened or ever will happen. Read Matthew 24, verses 21 and 22. The entire world, not just America, is at an inflection point, a point of major change, and decision time is here. The best is yet to come for the saved, and the worst is yet to come for the lost. Here are more reasons to believe decision time is near. 1. Concerning corruption and deceit on the FBI. On August the 25th, 2022, Mark Zuckerberg admitted to podcaster Joe Rogan that Facebook intentionally suppressed the Hunter Biden laptop story because the FBI warned Facebook to be on guard for Russian disinformation. The FBI had no proof that the information on Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation, and they had a lot of proof that it was true, including witnesses, photos, videos, emails, etc. But the FBI still unnecessarily and illegally meddled, lied in the election on behalf of the Democrats and to the detriment of Republicans. To make matters worse, the Democrats have prosecuted and jailed dozens of U.S. citizens, some in solitary confinement, for protesting what they thought was a corrupted outcome, and some believe the FBI raided Trump's home seeking evidence that can be used to keep Trump from running for president again. On August the 25th, 2022, President Joe Biden called MAGA Republicans a threat to democracy, but a corrupt FBI and media interfering in the election on behalf of one party and prosecuting members of the other parties for disagreeing with their illegal activities is a greater threat to democracy. The New World Order that President Joe Biden supports and world leaders are establishing will be the end of democracy. For example, for your information, don't forget that more than a dozen whistleblowers in the FBI have told U.S. senators the FBI is covering up the Hunter Biden story. On August the 26th, 2022, the FBI released a statement saying it cannot ask or direct companies to take action on information they received. The FBI said the FBI shared general warnings about foreign interference, nothing specific about Hunter Biden. Regardless of what they say, the FBI has not prosecuted Hunter Biden, raided his home, or taken any action against him. Number 2, reason for it being decision time. Concerning inflation, food shortages, and natural disasters, on August the 23rd, 2022, it was reported that the worst drought in 500 years will cause Europe's upcoming corn harvest to be 16% below the 5-year average. A low yield, accompanied by high fuel and fertilizer prices, is stressing farmers and driving up food pricing. 3, concerning world government, tracking everyone, and famine. On August the 24th, 2022, it was reported that Canada's Ministry of Environmental and Climate Change is planning to build a new facility that includes rooms for firearm storage, interrogations, and intelligence facilities. According to the article, intelligence agents will spy on and interrogate citizens accused of committing climate crimes. It is common knowledge that Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau wants to force farmers to reduce the amount of fertilizer they use to grow crops. It's also common knowledge that globalists believe they can control the world by controlling the world's food supply. There is concern that Trudeau is planning to arrest and interrogate farmers for committing climate crimes, using too much fertilizer, and selling food to individual citizens that can't be tracked or taxed. Nations that are now reducing or trying to reduce the use of fertilizer to meet 2030 Sustainable Development Goals include Canada, France, Netherlands, and Sri Lanka. Some writers believe this practice will spread to every nation on Earth and lead to unprecedented food shortages and famine. In an article titled "The War on Farmers and Food," the New American reported that it's becoming increasingly obvious that the green global elites are aiming for total food control, and that their power grab, which is now most evident in Holland, threatens the entire planet, including the United States. Number 4, also concerning tracking everyone. Dave Hodges, the Common Sense Show, on August the 29th said, Yuval Noah Harari, the powerful World Economic Forum gay atheist, said 3 days earlier, on August the 26th, all people are going to wear biometric sensors. Hodges asked, is this the mark in the forehead or the hand? Now, know that Harari thinks there are too many people on Earth, and he probably won't hesitate to terminate a person's right to buy and sell if they don't support his globalist agenda. 5, concerning a cashless society, tracking all buying and selling and the mark of the beast. On August the 29th, 2022, it was reported that Starbucks is going cashless to keep employees and customers from getting COVID from handling cash. 6, concerning the Sustainable Development 2030 goals, the state of California has a California Air Resources Board, CARB, and about 14 states in the U.S. follow the CARB rules. On August the 25th of this year, CARB changed their rules. By 2026, 35% of all new cars sold in California must be electric or plug-in hybrids. A report came out yesterday that in order to support 35% of new cars being sold in California, California must build 21 new nuclear power plants between now and 2030. That's 7 years to build 21 nuclear power plants. But yet, these standards are requiring that by 2030, 68% of all new cars sold in California must be electric or plug-in hybrids. And by 2035, just 12 years from now, virtually 100% of all new cars sold in California must be electric or plug-in hybrids. Some, not all, government officials believe this presents a couple of big problems. Some Californian officials contend that the California power grid, which has already experienced rolling blackouts, will never have enough charging capacity to charge all of California's new cars on the same day. Some of the 14 states that follow the CARB rules don't like the fact that CARB changed the rules without consulting them, letting their citizens vote on it. There will probably be lawsuits to determine if Californians can force the citizens of about 14 other states to buy electric or plug-in hybrid cars with no one getting to comment or vote on it. Some of those 14 states are also likely to have to upgrade their power grid. 7, on August the 29th, 2022, on the Tucker Carlson Tonight TV show, Tucker talked about major things that are happening now, and among other things, he said, things are falling apart very quickly. Europe is descending into poverty. Germans are getting poorer. Poles are standing in line all night to buy coal. In the UK, 70% of the restaurants are preparing to go under. In France, energy costs went up 25% in one day. Macron recently said France is facing the end of abundance. The Green New Deal means poverty. People will freeze to death. Factories will close. Unemployment will rise, and personal income will disappear. In the US, credit card debt is increasing. Energy costs are spiraling, and Biden warned that food shortages are real. Concerning what Tucker, a TV host, not a prophecy teacher, said, people need to remember that the World Economic Forum goal is for people to own nothing. Number 8, concerning the decline of America. On August the 24th of this year, it was reported that 20 million households in the United States are behind on their electric bill because of soaring electricity prices. Soaring utility bills, gas prices, food prices, etc., are making it harder for people to own other things. Utility shutoffs are increasing, and America's poorest people are being hurt the most. Biden can help the citizens of Europe and the US by pumping more oil and natural gas, but he refuses to do it. Government ownership of everything is a globalist Build Back Better goal, and Biden supports that. Globalists want a crisis to justify their transition to world government by 2030 or sooner. Number 9, concerning natural disasters. On August the 25th of this year, Fox Weather reported that there have been 6 rare 1,000-year rain events within a month. On July 9th, St. Louis got 9 inches of rain in 24 hours. On July 28th, eastern Kentucky got more than 10 inches of rain. In August, southern Illinois got 10 to 13 inches of rain in a few hours. Death Valley got a year of rain in 3 hours. This week, Dallas-Fort Worth got 9 inches of rain in 24 hours. On August the 24th, some areas of Mississippi got 8 inches of rain in 3 hours. Jackson, Mississippi received 5 to 15 inches of rain in 3 days, and the governor declared a state of emergency on August the 27th of this year. Number 10, for whatever it's worth, some ministries and individuals are doing a countdown to the upcoming midterm election, now less than 70 days away. They believe Biden, Fauci, the FBI, the DOJ, several prominent Democrats, and others are in danger of being investigated and prosecuted if the Republicans gain control of the House and Senate. They believe these people and groups will go to great lengths, perhaps cause riots, present false accusations, have Trump arrested, or do something desperate to hold on to power. This remains to be seen. The concern that the upcoming midterm election will be disrupted or unfair is alive and well. These 10 reasons alone are enough for any rational person to understand that the prophetic implications and the prophetic ramifications are all found in the Bible. With approximately 2,500 prophecies in the Bible, which around 2,000 have been fulfilled. These remaining 20% that we continue to talk about, we have every statistical right, every mathematical right added to our faith, where statistically the math supports the Bible, that the remaining prophecies will be fulfilled just as God spoke them. So if that's the case, then it's time to make a decision for Jesus. Before these things happen, before you're left with no choice, or the only choice left before you is to take the mark of the beast or die. Do not let this opportunity pass you by. It's a simple thing to say, Lord, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I've sinned against you. Whether by thought, by deed, by action, by inaction, regardless of how you see my failings, Lord, I ask you to forgive me. And I believe that you so loved the world that you gave your only begotten Son. You gave him. You allowed him to be crucified, to bear our iniquities on his back. and to fulfill everything that was prophesied about the Messiah in Isaiah 53. And that he rose again on the third day. And then he ascended to heaven, now is sitting at your right hand. I believe that Jesus died for me. And I ask him to come into my life, to be Lord over my life. That I submit myself to your authority, O God, and to the power and the anointing of the Holy Spirit. Please, Lord, forgive me. Amen. Let us know if you said that prayer for the first time. Let us know if you asked Jesus into your heart. Let us know if you made that decision. Because it is decision time. As we continue to look at the news, experts say the proposed new Iran deal is much worse than the 2015 agreement, as reported on Prophecy Newswatch. Although the Biden administration committed to re-entering a nuclear deal that would be longer and stronger than the original Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, put into place in 2015. Senior advisor at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Richard Goldberg, said the deal under consideration is shorter and weaker. After months of indirect negotiations between American, European, and Iranian diplomats, the proposed framework differs from that of the JCPOA on four key principles: breakout time, nuclear restrictions, a cap on uranium enrichment capabilities, and international sanctions. I want to open this report that just came in. And it says, and this is an exclusive right now, coming out, just released this moment. I'm going to take a break from the details of the proposed, but this report issued at 6:58 a.m. Jerusalem time. I'm sorry, 6:58 a.m. our time. So about 2 hours ago. It reads, a new nuclear deal between Iran and world powers is off the table and will not be signed in the foreseeable future, the Times of Israel Hebrew sister site Zman Yisrael has learned. This is the message that was conveyed to Prime Minister Yair Lapid in his recent conversation with President Joe Biden and other administration officials. This emerging outcome of the nuclear negotiations, which would have made international implications, is likely to be touted by Lapid in the coming election campaign, particularly against the opposition leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, who has repeatedly attacked the premier on the issue. The potential new nuclear deal was at the center of Israel's diplomatic and security consultations over the past year, with a concerned Jerusalem tracking the negotiations between Iran and representative world powers in Vienna, as well as the exchange of draft agreements between the side in recent weeks. As Lapid became convinced in recent days that a deal was becoming increasingly unlikely, he reprioritized national security challenges to focus on escalating violence in the West Bank, the fight against terrorism, the urgent need to strengthen the Palestinian Authority as it increasingly loses clout. The nuclear agreement that was being negotiated since Biden entered the White House in January 2021 focused on removing sanctions on Iran in exchange for limiting Tehran's ability to reach the capability to build a nuclear weapon. The Americans said that under the framework of the new nuclear deal, Iran would not be able to enrich uranium above 3.67% and could not reach a level at which it would be possible to produce a nuclear weapon. This limitation on Iran's nuclear program will continue until 2031 under the proposed deal. According to American comments given to Walla News reporter Barak Ravid 2 weeks ago, Iran would need to give up all uranium enriched 20% and 80% and 60% in its possession as part of the agreement. Hundreds of kilograms of enriched uranium would need to be removed from Iran or diluted. The centrifuges to enrich uranium would be removed and stored on Iranian soil at a warehouse under the supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency. The Americans also said Iran would not be able to carry out any plutonium processing which could be used for weapons purposes, and would redesign the plutonium reactor at Iraq so it cannot produce material for a nuclear bomb. Additionally, the Americans pledged that if a deal were signed, the International Atomic Energy Agency would be able to renew its strict monitoring of nuclear facilities in Iran after it was successfully curtailed by the Iranians. The IAEA monitoring is one of the major points of division that Israel has become involved in. The Iranians refused to let the agency continue its activities, and the Americans insisted after Israel pressured. Now, a deal appears to be off the agenda. The potential Iran deal has caused intense concern in Israel. Former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett appealed to the U.S. administration last month to refrain from an accord. I call on President Biden and the U.S. administration to refrain, even now at the last minute, from signing the agreement with Iran, Bennett tweeted on August the 23rd. This agreement would send approximately $250 billion to the Iranian terror administration's pocket and to its regional proxies, and would enable Iran to develop, install, and operate centrifuges with almost no restrictions in a mere 2 years, he added. Throughout the past year, even when it was very close, we successfully convinced our White House counterparts not to give in to Iranian demands. I hope this will remain the case. The emerging deal with Iran led to serious friction and arguments between Israel and the United States and significant internal tensions in Jerusalem. 2 weeks ago, Mossad chief David Barnea briefed defense reporters and warned of the dangers of a restored nuclear deal. According to a report in Yedioth Ahronoth newspaper, Barnea warned during a meeting the prime minister that the deal would allow Iran to obtain significant capabilities. According to Barnea, hundreds of billions of dollars would flow to Iran after the removal of sanctions. The money would serve to strengthen terror groups that encircle Israel, including Hezbollah, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Furthermore, he said the Iranians would accelerate their vision of a Shia crescent running from their border with Iraq to the Mediterranean, strengthening the Houthis in Yemen and pro-Iranian militia in the region. Barnea added that a deal would be a strategic disaster and declared it does not oblige Israel. The Mossad head, who is currently in the United States for talks on the Iranian issue, was later reprimanded by Lapid for his direct criticism of the Americans. Netanyahu, who dealt with Iran extensively during his years as prime minister, has maintained that the emerging deal was worse than the original signed in 2015 under then U.S. President Barack Obama. A week and a half ago, Netanyahu invited himself for a security briefing with Lapid on the Iranian issue, as this is right by law as opposition leader. After the meeting, Netanyahu claimed Lapid and Defense Minister Benny Gantz had fallen asleep at the wheel and that they were responsible for the Iranian nuclear failure. Netanyahu demanded that officials meet with members of Congress, influential officials, and senior media figures in the U.S. in an effort to thwart the deal. On Monday, a senior government official said that Netanyahu taught us exactly what not to do. In 2015, he went to Congress, spoke with senior government officials and the media, and we got the nuclear deal shoved in our face. This time, the official said, we worked quietly. We put in a tremendous amount of research and reached the opposite result. In a little over 2 weeks, Lapid will fly to participate in the UN General Assembly in New York. It's not yet clear whether he will meet with Biden while there. Biden is expected to be in New York on September 18th to 20th. Lapid and his entourage will land there on the morning of September 20th. Lapid is due to speak at the General Assembly on Thursday, September 22nd, and Iran is expected to be at the center of his comments. Immediately after the speech, Lapid will quickly fly back to Israel to take part in his son Yoav's wedding on Friday afternoon. This report just in from the Times of Israel. Just as we were about to dig in to the story about how this deal is so much worse. That takes us to our next break, and we will be back in 3 minutes and 18 seconds. We'll see you on the other side. Stay tuned.
We'll be right back with more Revealing the Truth with Rabbi Eric Walker right after this commercial break.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick and proud aunt. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. 1 in 6. That little girl sitting alone at the playground, she can't play like the other kids. She doesn't have the energy because she's hungry. School lunch will be her only meal today. It breaks my heart that this is the reality in our country, but it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste. This food is then provided to families and children in need. Being a kid should be about using your imagination, learning, and having fun. These children shouldn't have to miss out on simply being a kid because they're hungry. To find out how you can help end childhood hunger in your community, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Okay, men, this is your time. Maybe you didn't choose this, but you're here now. You're going to go out there and be an all-star caregiver. It's up to you. So what are you going to do? You're going to go grocery shopping, cook, clean, be there emotionally and physically. You got to dig deeper. Drive them to physical therapy, doctor's appointments. Don't you forget about the pharmacy. No, you won't. Because that's what caregivers do. Don't give up. Don't ever give up. This is your time to show the world, your family, and yourself that you're tougher than tough. Now go out there and be the best caregiver this world has ever seen. Caregiving is tougher than tough. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
In the Garden of Eden, God spoke his first prophecy. Not much has been said or written about the eternal impact of the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. What if every prophecy, and even Jesus' return, was tied to this prophecy and no one ever told you? Now you have a chance to read for yourself Rabbi Eric's latest book, 315, The Genesis of All Prophecy. Featured on Skywatch TV, this book is a must-read. Get your copy at Amazon or from Skywatch TV. And don't forget to order The Codist, Rabbi Eric's prophetic biblical thriller, exposing a diabolical plot to weaponize your DNA. And while you're at it, get his book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living. Welcome back to Revealing the Truth with Rabbi Eric Walker. Here's your host, Rabbi Eric Walker, ready to take your calls at 850-660-9595.
Shalom and welcome back to our final half hour of today's Revealing Prophecy edition of Revealing the Truth. We are continuing in covering a number of stories, and I want to bring you this next story as we take a look at what's going on in regards to energy. And I think that energy is going to be an ongoing issue. And so I bring you this report from Todd Strandberg, published at raptureready.com, entitled Nearing Midnight, Sleepwalking into an Energy Disaster. For many years, the U.S. government warned Germany of the dangers of becoming dependent on Russia for its supply of natural gas. Germany ignored our advice and proceeded to become all the more addicted to Russian natural gas. As of last year, Germany imported 80% of this form of fuel from Russia. In 2018, President Trump spoke in a UN speech about how dangerous it was for Germany to become dependent on Russia. The German diplomats at the UN openly laughed at Trump. Now that Russia has cut off the supply of natural gas to the German economy, no one in Berlin is laughing. The brutal invasion of Ukraine by Russian troops has forced the EU to pull away from Moscow. The EU's 27 member states agreed to voluntarily cut gas consumption by 15% between August and March between August of this year and March of next year. The ultimate plan is to cut all oil and gas imports from Russia. Here are some early steps that nations are taking to break the dependence on Russian natural gas. In Germany, Cologne's magnificent cathedral, normally lit throughout the night, now goes dark overnight. Public buildings, museums, and other landmarks, such as the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin, will no longer be illuminated overnight either. In France, shopkeepers will now be fined for keeping doors open and air conditioning running, a common practice. In Spain, Congress agreed to temperature limitations, air conditioning no cooler than 81 degrees Fahrenheit. In Italy, air conditioning in schools and public buildings has already been limited in what the government labeled Operation Thermostat. Europe is facing an energy crisis, and most people still don't grasp its full magnitude. Natural gas is very hard to move from one place to another. You cannot store large quantities of it. Some nations' operating plan is to buy natural gas from Norway. It would take each one of them a few years to tap into Norwegian gas fields. The question is, what are they going to do this year? It's very dangerous to become over-dependent on one form of energy. Many areas of China rely heavily on hydropower for the production of electricity. A drought has forced China to close factories because there's not enough water to run the turbines. Texas learned about the need for energy diversity when cold weather in 2019 greatly hampered the supply of natural gas for electrical production. I had no idea that cold weather can freeze up gas wells. It's become very popular to ban the usage of fossil fuels by a given date. The California Air Resources Board just approved regulations that ban the sale of new gas engine vehicles by 2035, requiring all new cars to run on electricity or hydrogen. Despite the strong demand for electric cars, sales made up only 3% of the total car sales last year. As a sidebar, the cost of an electric vehicle right now is approximately $66,000, more than the average household income. It used to be, when calculating whether or not to give you a loan, that a car payment factored in would be a certain percentage of your total income. But there is no provision within the lending and financial world for lending you 100% of your income. Payments on a $66,000 vehicle would be astronomical, and the financing would have to exceed possibly 10 years or longer. I can remember a time when you could buy a house for $66,000. There is no chance we will meet this goal. They might as well vote that all cars should be able to fly by 2030. We do not have the capability of transmitting the power needed to charge that many vehicles. We do not produce enough key metals to build that many cars. Something in the order of about 90% of the lithium that used in batteries is processed in China right now, which is not a desirable situation. The Democratic Republic of Congo produces 70% of the world's supply of cobalt. With an average price of an electric vehicle currently $66,000, most people cannot afford one. The Paris Agreement on climate change is a key reason why energy prices are so high. As soon as it was adopted by 196 parties on December the 12th of 2015, oil companies quit investing in fossil fuels. 7 years later, we're still using these products, and they are at record high prices. Some people are waking up and are trying to prepare for the coming energy disaster. In Poland, people have lined up for days to buy coal. A small town in Germany of 60 people has been stockpiling sawdust to power homes and businesses. There's been one factor that has forced people to face reality. In the past few months, businesses have started receiving shocking gas and electricity bills. One pub owner in Great Britain was told her annual gas bill would go from $30,000 to $60,000 over the next year. Most bills have doubled, and some have gone up as much as 500%. Millions of businesses still weak from the COVID-19 lockdown will be forced to close forever. I firmly believe that demonic insanity is the only way to explain why world energy policies have become removed from basic common sense. As the world becomes more evil, the devil has greater power over the minds of people. As it says in 2 Timothy 3:13, but evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. A sobering story from our good friends. As we read this latest story from the Jewish News Syndicate, Israel and the United States completed simulated missile defense exercise. The Battle Lab drill was designed to boost tactics, techniques, and procedures to protect the Jewish state from ballistic threats. The United States and Israel recently completed a simulated joint defense exercise. The ministry's Israel Missile Defense Organization, in collaboration with the U.S. Missile Defense Agency, the Israeli Air Defense Command, and the U.S. Air and Missile Defense Task Force, conducted the drill at Elbit Systems Battle Lab in Israel in late July, according to the statement. The exercise examined ways to protect the state of Israel from ballistic missiles. According to Israeli Defense Ministry, the drill follows a long history of strong cooperation between the two countries' military forces on joint air defense. The exercise was intended to improve soldiers' knowledge of tactics, techniques, and procedures, while also making it easier for the forces to collaborate in the future. The Israeli military used the Arrow, David Sling, and Iron Dome air defense systems during the exercise, while the American participants used their Patriot, Aegis, and THAAD terminal high altitude area defense systems. The exercise was held at the Israeli Test Bed War Lab, built by Elbit subsidiary El-Sra. The lab is capable of simulating Israeli and American air defense systems in a single shared environment and of recording and displaying real-time data to assist in subsequent debriefings. This exercise represents another step in our extensive cooperation with the American Air, Missile, and Defense Forces. The combination of the different systems significantly improves our forces' readiness to face evolving threats on several fronts simultaneously. Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz stated the relationship between Israel and the U.S. continues to grow stronger in the face of the region's increasing threats and challenges in order to maintain our security and regional stability. I applaud the successful test and the continued progress in Israel's defense systems. My friends, if we do not continue on a path to improve our support of Israel and get out of being the arbiter of a peace agreement or a two-state solution in opposition to God's word that says, never again will my land be divided. Never again will they be two nations. Contextually, God was speaking about Judah and Israel. But now, as we look in these end times, could that have been a prophetic word for today in regards to this two-state solution that continues to be peddled, where Israel would coexist with their enemy right on their borders? It's bad enough as it is. But that, my friends, would give Palestinians sovereignty over a border with Iraq, allowing a clear path for China and Iran to bring weapons in support of a defeat of the sovereign state of Israel, the place of Messiah's return. This last story, The Pattern by Ed Wood, taken from terryjamesprophecyline.com, and Prophecy Update. You never want a serious crisis to go to waste, and what I mean by that is an opportunity to do things that you think could not be done before. That's a quote from Rahm Emanuel. I've read The Rise and the Fall of the Third Reich twice over the years by William Shirer, and here's what I see as the recipe for tyranny from that excellent book. I present below the most notable past example of what I believe are current ones. Number one, to use people's fear in a tumultuous situation against them and give them an answer man or entity to resolve it. For Hitler, it was the chaos of a post-World War I defeated Germany, with its accompanying inflation, unemployment, and hopelessness. For America, it is a similar, though less pronounced version of inflation and similar growing pessimism regarding the future. Number two, give them an object, be it an ethnic group, other country, disease, to blame for these conditions. Hitler blamed the high cost of reparations demanded by that war's victors, but most notably the Jews, whom he said were behind this and all of Germany's woes. For the free world today, it's COVID and monkeypox, plus anyone who does not subscribe to the current far-left agenda on some national governments, America included. Number three, manipulate the religious system so people turn towards men instead of towards God. For Germany, it was Nazism and Mein Kampf. For many countries considered to be Christian, it is turning away of much of organized religion towards the doctrines of political correctness, sexual perversion, paganism, and away from those doctrines of God, which are clearly defined in the Bible. Number four, control disposition of information and allow no dissent. Hitler was a master of the media and public events where his speeches had such a mesmerizing one-night effect, claimed supernatural effect on the masses that they willingly gave away both their consciences and their freedom. No dissent was allowed. Today, we see social media and internet access increasingly restricting any communication, being considered to be misinformation, such as the truth about COVID, suppression of information of adverse vaccine reactions, or opposition to current woke ideology. And I fear that this is only the beginning. Number five, an increase of government control in every aspect of life, starting with economics, and progressively add to that list. In a few short years, the Nazi government was in total control of everything in Germany. 2 years of COVID mandates were the greatest ally of government overreach I have ever seen in the free world. It is my opinion, a great psychological experiment that succeeded in stealing away freedom on a massive scale that has never been accomplished before. Number six, keep the people so distracted that they can't see how they're being duped in both Germany of the first half of the 20th century and what were the democracies of the 21st century, just getting through each day for the average person has consumed their attention to such a degree that they don't have time to sit back and just see how they're going to be led into tyranny. Number seven, get to the kids via control the educational system and use the legal system to supersede the authority of their parents. Hitler used the schools to indoctrinate German children into the Nazi gospel and created the Hitler Youth, the goal of which was to instill in them a loyalty to the part which surpassed that of loyalty to their parents. In America, critical race theory and other leftist ideologies is attempting to do the same thing. Parents who are fighting these things are now considered potential terrorists. He says, as I look through history, I see a common pattern and exactly the same evil being repeated over and over again. Only the faces and specifics have changed. And I have no doubt at all that it's all just a mild prelude and softening up process for what's ahead for those left behind. Ask yourself if these things have been and are now coming back upon us in such an extreme degree now, while God's Holy Spirit is still acting as a restraining presence in believers. How bad will it get when the Spirit departs? It's all up to you to decide if you want to go through that or not. There is a way out, and this is it. John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. And John 3:17, for God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. It's just that simple. Now, what are you waiting for? Share this program with your unbelieving friends and family. Let them hear for themselves what's going on around the world, leading us into chaos. Let them open their eyes to what the Bible says in the passages that we quoted today, in Ezekiel 38 and 39, in the book of Revelation, from Revelation 1:1 to the end of Revelation 22. Let them hear for themselves, not just from you, but the composite picture painted by these prophecy experts that we bring you every Wednesday. And we bring them to you so that you will have prophetic insights into what the countdown to the campaign of Armageddon is beginning to look like. When it comes to pre-trib rapture, mid-trib rapture, post-trib rapture, I can tell you that the division among the camps and the scriptural arguments in each camp is convincing in all three camps. But all three can't be right. So statistically, there's a 66% chance that one of those three are wrong. I can only state, in regards to the rapture, we will all find out at the same time. But keep your eyes glued to the alignment that's taking place. That the world is being so corrupted and people are being so oppressed. And God, who's bringing these storms and allowing and not holding back this flooding to take place. Not holding back because mankind is in its most fallen state since the Garden of Eden. Sodom and Gomorrah was a mere foreshadowing of the kind of sexual immorality, the deviant behavior that's taking place, the unbiblical conduct, the redefinition of male and female. All these things are apostasy, heresy, if supported by any of denominational Christianity. This is part of the foretold great falling away. The people are so distracted by all the things going on in their own life that they don't have time to pray, to read their Bible, to go to church. Can the churches in Europe afford to keep the lights on? Or will this be the last crushing blow to European Christianity? These are the signs of the times that we are in. And when there is poverty, a food shortage, an energy crisis, unbridled inflation, excessive spending and borrowing, and now the addition of non-qualifying mortgages resurfacing. Did we not learn our lesson in the 80s when the huge collapse took place? And yet we're now allowing people who are not income qualified, who have no down payment, to buy a home and to receive a mortgage. The qualification process that I went through no longer is the process for the non-qualifying mortgages. And of course, they're much higher interest rate. Those who locked in the 2 to 3% rate have made the best financial decision they could make to impact the next 30 years or 15 years, or whatever the length of your mortgage is. Because right now, that's giving you security on the lowest possible mortgage payment you can have. Today, with interest rates looming in the 5, growing maybe to the 6, maybe to the 7, and for non-qualifying mortgages, 8, 9%. The same home for the same price, the mortgage payment will be double, if not more. This will bring economic collapse into America, make us look toward government subsidies and bailouts for possibly a move, maybe behind the scenes. I'm only speculating here. The government is trying to plan how they're going to have you live in government housing and remain in your home, but your home no longer owned by you, but by the federal government. I believe that this is part of Joe Biden's plan and the globalists that he takes his counsel from. And that brings us to the conclusion of today's program. I want to leave you with this blessing before we go to our final break. From Numbers chapter 6, verse 22, the Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron and his sons, this is how you are to bless the children of Israel." He goes on to say, "In this way I will put my name on them and I will bless them." Please bow your heads to receive the Aaronic benediction. Yivarech Adonai v'yasmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panavalecha v'kunecha, Yasar Adonai panavalecha v'yasim lecha shalom. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his face toward you and give you his peace. In the name of the Prince of Peace, Jesus our Messiah. Amen and amen. Until we see you right back here tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. for the next edition of Revealing the Truth, the Revelation study continued. I bid you shalom.
The program you are listening to is brought to you by Igniting a Nation, a 501c3 nonprofit ministry. We are 100% supported by your contributions. You can partner with us and support this program, our outreach in Kisii, Kenya, and our support of Israel. Visit us at www.ianbn.com and take advantage of access to thousands of hours of teaching. You can also donate there on our social media platforms. Your support is a blessing here, there, and everywhere.
This is the story of a very special woman. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician or an entrepreneur. Her knowledge was limitless and still is. She could also make monsters disappear, especially those that lurked in the shadows under the bed. Once, this woman put back together this teenage girl's broken heart, which had been shattered in 1,000 pieces, just by giving her a bear hug. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting. A teenager. Learning the lingo.
Today I'm going to help parents translate teen slang. Now, when a teen says something is on fleek, it's exactly like saying, "That's rad." It simply means that something is awesome or cool. Another one is totes. It's exactly like saying, "Totally, just shorter." As in, "I totes love going to the mall with Becca." Another word you might hear is jelly. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will think you're, rad just the same. To learn more, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Thank you for listening to Revealing the Truth with Rabbi Eric Walker. Join us tomorrow at 8 a.m. Central Time and give us a call at 850-660-9595. Full downloadable versions of all the teachings are available at ignitinganation.com. Don't forget to listen 24/7 for Revealing Life, Revealing the Bible, Revealing Prophecy, Revealing the Gospels, and more of Revealing the Truth. Download Igniting a Nation or listen on iHeartRadio. Until we see you right back here tomorrow, Shalom.